Sound ready, 3, 2, 1, action.
Bos, sorry bos, tapi bos nak update tak pasal purchaser kita yang dekat tanah dekat Berak tu?
Tak apa, you tak payah fikir benda tu.
Tapi bos, auction tu besok. Macam mana kalau tak ada, tak tahu?
So, I dah settlekan.
Selamat sejahtera semua. Kes Elon dan Awam Harta tak alih bagi nombor file JA38120224 atas permintaan pihak pemegang gadaian terhadap pemilik 6B Rubber Sdn Bhd. Harta yang akan didelong adalah PN35553 lot 9108 Mukim Hutan Melintang Hilir Perak. Harga dizab diletakkan pada RM 4 juta. Adakah terdapat penawar?
Lebih daripada 4.1 juta.
RM 4.1 juta telah ditawarkan oleh pembida 1. Ada yang ingin menawarkan lebih?
Saya tawar 4.5 juta.
RM 4.5 juta oleh pembida kedua. Ada yang lebih tinggi?
4.8 juta.
RM 4.8 juta oleh pembida ketiga. Ada lagi yang ingin menawarkan lebih?
5 juta.
RM 5 juta. RM 5 juta oleh pembida pertama. Ada lagi? RM 5 juta pertama kali, RM 5 juta kali kedua, RM 5 juta kali ketiga. Didelong dan dijual kepada pembida pertama yang bernama Gurbachan SINGH dengan harga RM 5 juta. Tahniah.
Tanya bos.
Dia orang tak tahu sebenarnya kita beli untuk kita.
Tak baik lah bos.
This is my business.
Bos ni dokumen yang bos minta.
Thank you.
Betul ke ni bos?
Kau kenapa kan tarik-tarik?
Bos fikir balik betul-betul. Betul ke?
Kau diam je, biar aku yang buat.
Mr. Gurbachan, how's our progress on the land?
Actually, I want to be honest with you guys. The land is mine. And from this moment, I'm not your lawyer anymore.
Cakap apa ni? Apa pula macam tu ni? Kalau kau bukan lawyer kita orang, siapa lagi lawyer kita orang? Pasal kan? Lawyer kita orang mana? Kita orang dah banyak lah. Banyak kita orang ni begini. Kita orang dah bayar lah.
The case involved a dispute over estate land in Hilir Perak PN 35553, lot 9108, where 230 sub-purchasers had agreements to buy plots and had made a deposit payment. Due to financial issues, the land was put up for a sale by tender. Concerned, the purchasers sought assistance from their solicitor, which is Gurbachan SINGH, who filed caveats to protect their interests. However, Gurbachan SINGH himself bid for the land at auction, won the bid, and later claimed the land as his own. He then requested further contributions for the purchaser towards the deposit, then formed a company with his wife and a friend as directors, transferring ownership to it. He told the purchaser he was no longer their lawyer and offered to sell the plots back to them. Feeling betrayed, the purchaser sued him for breaching his fiduciary duty as their solicitor.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Aimi Shazwani binti Mazlan and my metric number is 065424. I will talk about the judgment under this case. There are 3 judgments that is given. Let's look at the High Court, which the High Court ruled in favour of the appellants, holding that there was no valid solicitor-client relationship between the first appellant and the purchasers at the time of the auction. The court found that the agreements between the purchasers and SPPKB to be void due to non-compliance with Section 214A of the National Land Code and Section 24 of the Contracts Act 1950. It also accepted the appellant's assertion that he acted in a personal capacity when bidding for the land, not as a trustee, and dismissed the claim that he owed any fiduciary duty to the purchasers. The court further ruled that the corporate veil should not be lifted and found no basis to hold the 4th appellant company or the 5th appellant liable. Now let me explain about the Court of Appeal, where the Court of Appeal, however, overturned the High Court's findings. The majority found that the first appellant had indeed acted as the solicitor for the purchasers based on his conduct and correspondence, even in the absence of a formal retainer. His role in advising the purchasers, attending meetings, writing letters, and facilitating legal processes created a legitimate expectation that he represented their interests. The Court of Appeal held that he had used confidential information obtained in his capacity as their solicitor to acquire the land for himself, thereby breaching his fiduciary duties and unjustly enriching himself. If It lifted the corporate veil on the fourth appellant company, finding it to be a vehicle used by the first appellant to mask his personal acquisition. The court declared that the transfer invalid and ordered an account of the profits gained. Finally, the Federal Court upheld the decision of the Court of Appeal. It reaffirmed that a solicitor-client relationship does not require a written retainer but may be inferred from conduct and the reasonable belief of the client. The court found that the relationship had not been expressly terminated and continued to exist at the time the land was acquired. As such, the first appellant had acted in conflict with his fiduciary duties and was held accountable for the breach. He was ordered to pay damages with the quantum to be assessed, taking into account the purchaser's share value, profits obtained and any expenditure he incurred. While the court agreed to lift the corporate veil to expose misuse of the company, it declined to void the land transfer due to the involvement of innocent third-party buyers. The Federal Court's judgment strongly emphasized the ethical obligations of legal practitioners and the importance of preserving the integrity of the solicitor's-client relationship. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tam Tong Ling and my matrix number is 065799. I will expand on the existence and scope of a solicitor-client relationship and the fiduciary duties that follow. A solicitor-client relationship is based on fact. It does not need a written retainer and it can arise in three ways. Firstly is expressly in writing or orally, and secondly is by the solicitor clear statement to act, and lastly is implied through conduct. The relationship exceeds when someone seeks legal help and the solicitor agrees to accede. And lastly, the person reasonably believes the solicitor is acting for them. A written agreement or payment of fee is not necessary. This is proven in the English case of Flatgate LLP against Harrison, where the court held a retainer can be oral or implied. And in the Malaysian case of Yong and Co against Wick Hogtag, the court found that a retainer may arise from conduct over time. Once the relationship exists, fiduciary duties apply, and these include acting in the client's best interest, not profiting without informed consent, and disclosing any personal interest to avoid conflicts. Rule 16 requires lawyers to uphold the client interest, and Rule 35 prevents abuse of client confidence. As stated in the case of Botman against FADSZ, a fiduciary must not be in a position where duty and interest may conflict. Unless limited in writing, a solicitor is expected to carry the matter until it is completed.
My name is Devashin Mahendran, my metric number is 06671, and I will continue with the third core legal principle arising from the case of GURBACHAN SINGH, which is the breach of fiduciary duty and unjust enrichment. This principle can be understood through three main elements, each grounded in established case law. Firstly, a person in a fiduciary position is not permitted to make a profit from that position, nor should they place themselves in a situation where their personal interest conflicts with their duty. This principle was clearly affirmed in the landmark case of Bray against Ford, 1896, where Lord Herschel stated that it is an inflexible rule of a court of equity that a person in a fiduciary position is not allowed to put himself in a position where his interest and duty conflict. The second principle is that if a fiduciary does make a profit while acting in that capacity, they are accountable for that profit regardless of their intention. This was demonstrated in the case of Regal Hastings Limited against Gulliver 1942, where Lord Russell explained that the profiteer, however honest and well-intentioned, cannot escape the risk of being called upon to account. The final principle acknowledges that equity must also operate fairly. This more flexible approach was taken in Phipps against Boardman 1967, where Lord Denning observed that a rigid rule denying all profit or compensation can be unfair, especially where the fiduciary's effort created value. Equity may allow a partial profit to be retained. Now let us turn to the relevant provisions under the Legal Provision Practice and Etiquette Rules 1978 LPPER and the Legal Provision Act 1976 LPA, which support these legal principles established in the case of GURBACHAN SINGH. The relevant rules under LPPER are Rule 5, Rule 16, Rule 25, Rule 31, and Rule 35. The relevant provisions under Legal Profession Act 1976 are Section 94 Clause 3 Clause C, Section 94 Clause 3 Clause N, Section 94 Clause 3 Clause O, where it explains the definition of misconduct. Section 94 Clause 4 Clause A provides that a lawyer may be suspended if found guilty of any offences involving dishonesty or the misuse or misappropriation of a client's money or property.
My name is Muhammad Khairi Aizat bin Muhammad Hilmi with number matrix 066698. Now we will move forward to discuss the impact of this case. So firstly, the first impact is expanded understanding of fiduciary duties beyond written intent. In this case, significantly contributes the understanding of fiduciary duties by confirming that a solicitor-client relationship may arise not only through a formal written retainer, but also impliedly through conduct, words, and circumstances. In this case, although the solicitor as first appellant did not have a formal letter of appointment from the purchasers, the Federal Court held that his actions such as applying for caveats, attending meetings, and advising the committee established a de facto fiduciary relationship. This ruling makes it clear that once a lawyer steps into a position where clients reasonably rely on their advice or representation, fiduciary duties attach even in the absence of a signed agreement. This interpretation has profound ethical implications for the legal profession in Malaysia. It requires lawyers to be mindful that any legal assistance rendered in a professional context, even informally, can impose binding ethical and fiduciary obligations. Lawyers must therefore exercise heightened diligence and clarity in defining the scope of their involvement. If a solicitor intends to act in a limited capacity, it is now essential to document and communicate that clearly to avoid misunderstanding. The case thus expands the legal profession's duty of care, reinforcing the importance of accountability, transparency, and proactive ethical conduct from the very outset of any professional engagement. So the second impact that could be found in this case is regarding duty of loyalty and prohibition against self-dealing. So in this case, the solicitor took advantage of confidential information and his position of trust by bidding for the estate land in his own name despite being approached by the purchasers to act on their behalf. He later claimed that the land belonged to him and attempted to resell the plots to the same purchasers. The federal court found that such conduct amounted to a breach of fiduciary duty, particularly the duty of loyalty and the duty to avoid conflicts of interest. The court emphasized that fiduciaries must not place themselves in positions where personal interest could conflict with their duties to clients. So this judgment underscored the ethical boundaries lawyers must observe, especially regarding conflicts of interest and self-dealing. Fiduciary duty is not merely about acting honestly, but about avoiding any situation where personal gain may compromise professional loyalty. The decision in this case reaffirms that lawyers cannot exploit their privileged position for personal enrichment, even if no explicit dishonesty is proven. It promotes the ethical principle that acting in good faith includes ensuring that clients' interests are never subordinated to the lawyer's own financial or strategic advantage. So next is the impact of recognition of equitable remedies and constructive trust. So the federal court imposed a constructive trust on the estate land holding that the solicitor had obtained in breach of his fiduciary duty and must account for profits made. Even though he had transferred the land to a company he controlled, the court ordered that the benefits arising from the land be restored to the original beneficiaries, the purchasers. So the solicitor was allowed to deduct illegitimate expenses, but any unjust gains had to be returned. This remedy was a direct consequence of the solicitor's breach of ethical and fiduciary obligation. So this approach highlights how Malaysian courts will deploy equitable doctrines to protect clients and reinforce the duties owned by lawyers. It sends a strong message that any fiduciary who misuse their position will be subject to restitution and will not be permitted to retain ill-got benefits. For the legal profession, it deepens the understanding that fiduciary breaches carry both moral and financial consequences, reinforcing the need for ethical vigilance in all transactions involving client trust and property.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Putri Nazira binti Muhammad Ali with matrix number 065962. The fourth impact would be lifting the corporate veil to prevent misuse by fiduciaries. The court also held that it was appropriate to lift the corporate veil of the company to which the solicitor had transferred the land. Although the issue had not been explicitly pleaded, the court ruled that it could pierce the corporate structure to do justice, especially where the company was used as a vehicle to conceal fiduciary breaches. The evidence showed that the company was merely a facade controlled by the solicitor and his associate to hold the land lawfully acquired from the clients. This aspect of the judgment expands the scope of ethical accountability for lawyers in Malaysia. It affirms that lawyers cannot hide behind corporate entities to evade liability or shape wrongful conduct. The legal profession must understand that where corporate forms are abused to perpetrate fiduciary misconduct, the court will intervene. And this decision reinforces the duty of transparency, honesty, and integrity, cautioning lawyers against using legal structures for personal gain at the expense of those they are duty-bound to serve. Next, heightened expectations for ethical conduct and professional clarity. One of the broader implications of the case is the court's firm stance that lawyers must communicate their role clearly when approached by potential clients. In this instance, the solicitor claimed he was not acting as a lawyer when bidding for the estate land, but the court found that he had not sufficiently disclaimed that role at the relevant time. His conduct gave rise to a reasonable expectations that a professional relationship existed, and this late denial without clear prior notice was deemed ethically unacceptable. This ruling elevates professional standards by reminding lawyers that silence or ambiguity can create obligations. It contributes to the understanding of fiduciary duties by requiring not only honesty, but also clarity in dealings with clients or potential clients. Lawyers must be proactive in defining the scope of engagement and must document any limitations on their role. Ethical conduct now includes the duty to avoid misleading impressions, reinforcing the broader principle that legal practice demands both legal precision and moral integrity. Next, fiduciary accountability includes restitution and return of improper gains. A key feature of the decision was the court's nuanced treatment of financial accountability following a breach of fiduciary duty. While it recognized that the solicitor had incurred legitimate expenses in acquiring the land, it held that any gains obtained through the breach had to be returned to the clients. The court also emphasized that it would not be just to allow a fiduciary to profit from a position of trust where loyalty and honesty were compromised. For lawyers, this reinforces the importance of acting with complete integrity in all fiduciary dealings. It clarifies that even if a lawyer invests effort or incur costs, any benefit acquired through unethical conduct must be surrendered. This ensures that lawyers are not rewarded for breaching their duties and that clients receive the full value of what they were entitled to. The principle promotes ethical behavior by aligning financial accountability with professional responsibility, reminding legal practitioners that trust-based roles carry strict obligations not to misuse opportunities for personal advantage. In conclusion, the decision stands as a landmark case that deepens the understanding of fiduciary duties and ethical responsibilities within the Malaysian legal profession. It clarifies that fiduciary obligations arise not only from formal agreements but also from conduct, and it reinforces the strict standards expected of lawyers, particularly in avoiding conflicts of interest, acting with loyalty, and being fully transparent with clients. Collectively, these 6 impacts strengthen the framework of professional ethics in Malaysia and serve as a critical guide for legal practitioners in navigating their duties with honest and accountability.